to the, this year, as we learned, added to the cost of police pensions by a simple change of that's a choice, and that just keeps adding this. The number of days people get off, the billing clerk in the fire department is working, I think, approximately what equates to 44 full weeks of the year. The rest is sick time, vacation time, 3 weeks worth of holidays. That's what contributes to this. That's what kills all our other budgets, prevents us from getting up capital expense, and I think drives people out of town who can't afford the taxes anymore. That's the point of this chart.
May I?
Sure.
Thank you. 2 points. I've made a lot of charts over the years, and I've done budget charts and for the schools and the municipal, and I've broken out the debt, and so I understand, and then I've done levy charts, and so I would just add to what Justin said, in that this is a levy plot. It's not a, it's not trying to explain the world. It's a levy plot. I mean, there's a million plots you can do. The other point I want to make was something I think that Mr. Wojcik mentioned, was about pushing off the expenses. And if you look at this chart, it's going at a certain clip, and then it starts to increase. And if we say that the bonds are part of the problem with this increase, part of the contribution to this increase, well, I'm going to make a quick argument that if instead of bonding everything, we had added that money into the prior budgets, the sharp knee in the curve would just be less. I mean, it would have been more money each of these earlier years, more money each of these earlier years. And I'll argue that, we would have gotten to the same place. It just wouldn't have been a knee jerk. We would have added in more money every year, and we probably would have gotten to the same place. So, yeah, if you put things off, you have to pay more later. You have to pay not necessarily more later, but you notice a big change later. On the other hand, if you don't put things off, they cost more along the way, and it's just a more gradual climb to approximately the same location. That's just a comment I have. When you start to look at curves and knees and curves, that's just my comment on that. Thank you.
Right, but I guess, and I'm not going to disagree with you. I think, because you said something that's very important, which is what you just said was that you might have ended up in the same place anyway. But it would have felt less jarring to people as a perception point if it doesn't have to do with whether or not you need to replace a roof or a boiler. Do you need to replace the roofs and the boilers all in the same year, kind of thing? And when you put things off for so long, what happens is, and it wasn't that long ago, it's a compelling thing. We all want to be able to say this. We all want to be able to say, we went for 10 years without increasing taxes. Brilliant storyline. Fantastic. The only place in Rhode Island that could say that was the city of Woonsocket. And they went out just 2 years ago with a 15% supplemental tax because they got to the point where they couldn't run the place anymore. And I was the guy who got the phone calls from the school teachers who said, my paycheck just bounced. What are you going to do about it? Don't ask me what I'm going to do about it. But what was the solution? The solution was to renegotiate contracts. It was to investigate. Now, unfortunately, the city put itself in the hole with a pension obligation bond, and that's a totally different animal. Let's not even talk about that. But in this same story, this red line story, there's also the town's recognition of its underfunding its police pension. At $700,000 a year, that's as big as your biggest bond. So it's the things that have been added, sometimes by the state through pension reform and asking everybody to put ante up more. That's the storyline you have to, I think, I appreciate what Justin is trying to show here, but there is actually a really rich story behind it that also needs to be told, which is that your basic, how many buildings have you got, how many people have you got, how many pieces of equipment are you using to service the public? There just hasn't been that much change.
Here's part of the rich story is that many, many people couldn't pay their utility bills when the taxes started to go up, and a lot of foreclosures happened, and people moved from town. That's part of the rich story also.
Yeah, but the same populace just voted for a school bond.
Overtaxation is not
Well,
part of the American
True.
dream.
Same
It's not.
people voted for school bond.
Yep, the town,
And
the
as
town
you know,
voted
I
for
didn't
it. The town
support it.
voted
No.
to support it.
Well, what's different about.
Again and again and again.
So we're
what's-
getting philosophical, but I wanted to just say this is, actually, this is kind of the thing that I hope the Budget Committee continues to talk about. Not because it's necessarily right answers and wrong answers, but the conversation you have about it gets you to your charter responsibilities of, not only what is going to get us through this year, but if we're looking at 5-year stability and a plan towards, trying to be responsible with your resources, these are the kinds of things you need to talk about and understand what's the underlying driver. Isn't a bunch of crazy conspiracy black helicopter politicians finding ways to spend more money, but there are some real economic drivers that inform why some of the things that town government buys are just getting more and more expensive year over year.
mainly contracts. It's like the library, 6% annually increases in salaries and benefits. That's what drives this, and it can't be afforded. I mean,
But
you
in the-
mentioned a story.
In the heart of this curve, see, the problem is, you're partially right, so I don't want to pick a fight with you, but in the heart of this curve, where it's going up the steepest, is a 6-year run when the police department took 6 zeros in a row. So there's something else that helps explain it, not just the contracts, but something else that goes on.
Took what? I didn't understand. Took, the police department took.
Accepted zeros in their collective bargaining agreement.
0% increases for
Right,
6 years.
like a lot of the rest of the country during the recession.
Right,
I'm
but,
just saying.
but
it's-
the line still went up, Ruth. So
Okay,
there's
so-
You can't
more.
expect the town who is not getting, like Justin's blue dottage line, the townspeople are not getting more raises. You can't expect them to keep losing homes, losing they can't pay the utility bills so that you can buy this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't work like that. The town only has so much money in it for taxes.
In-
And this is overestimated, overrated. And one other negative, one other comment on what someone said, it might have been you, Jeff, that you can get to it a million different places. I don't agree with that. This is a very, very close chart to what is actually true. And I also don't agree that you would end up in the same place just curving the chart, making the curve a little more gradual. You don't have to end up at this high rate. With better planning in the past, which is why I think people should have to bite the bullet now. You can't just say, oh, well, now we just go forward. It actually, if you want to explain it better, John.
Well, I mean, I was going to say this a minute ago, and so to your point, Mr. Wojcik, and what could have happened is we could have realized in the year 1990, when this started, that, in about 15 years, we're going to need to build 3 elementary schools, so therefore, we should not let our budgets run at, and this is how they used to run, at 4% and 5% and 6% increases a year. When I first got on the budget committee, I was flabbergasted the first 2 years because, budget after budget in the docket was increasing at 4%, 5%, 6%, 7% a year. So the prudent thing might have been to say we're not going to have increases for a decade because we're going to have 3 school bonds in 15 years. That would have been an approach, but that's not what happened.
Right.
Okay, and we all know that life was going on. Tiverton taxes continued to increase, and all of a sudden there was a need, and that's why I made the comment. And I may have didn't necessarily mean there's a million ways to get to the same point, but I believe if you had taken those bonds and just staged them out sooner, or saved the money in the piggy bank and then spent it and built all these new infrastructure items, that it wouldn't have been a jolt. But I think you still would have spent that money to get to this place where we have all these buildings and all this infrastructure. So, thank you.
Planning.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that in part, that's one of your points. We just went through the capital expenditure budget, and there's many things that you said if we wanted to do that prudent, putting money aside and keeping things in good shape, right now we would be spending more than $80,000 a year.
This year, anyway. But and I just want to kind of follow up on one thing, because from that chair where Donna's sitting right now, I've said over and over and over again, and I know that you've paid attention, the structure of the tax base of the town is overwhelmingly single-family homes of $150,000 value and less. So there is a finite limit to what the budget of the town can be.
Yep.
And that's the other part of the conversation is, with that base, what can you support? But I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's two parts of that equation, right? So that's your reality for how much can the resource base grow. And there's also, what is the reality of the underlying expenditure pattern? Why is it the way it is? Why do trash contracts get more expensive every year? You need to know how to structure that contract, you have to ask the right questions. So when we've been asking those questions, you know what the answer is? Workers' compensation insurance. So what we need to do is eliminate a trash curbside collection service either entirely or eliminate the form where people pick up the trash and replace it with a machine picks up the trash. And you'll eliminate the driver that pushes the cost of trash contract. Those are the kinds of inquiries we've been trying to do over the last couple of years. So this red line really could have kept going, but there's a whole bunch of things that have happened to try to flatten this out a little bit. I guess not my frustration, but my warning is, I feel like I'm running out of things where I can save money. Yes, contract negotiations are very, very important for this town going forward, but all of the other things, whether it's streetlights, energy usage, and we talk about these things all the time. Those things that low-hanging fruit, if you will, has already been addressed. Fuel management system, I don't know why it took this town so long. It's happened before I got here. Just before I got here, I had to pay the bill, but can't take the credit for the project. But you had fuel pumps that were running on paper slips, right? So your fuel expenditures are down by about 25%. You want to know why? Is it because gas is all of a sudden a little bit cheaper, or is it because we actually do a better job of managing the inventory of fuel? I think it's the latter. But what's different now from what it was here maybe 10 years ago is that those items have been explored and addressed, and now you've got a very narrow set of things that you can fix. And even if you fix them to the degree that you want to, you're still going to have some underlying trends that you don't control that are going to push you up.
I would only
Which is
go.
what?
Oh, Mr. Cottigal.
You know, I agree with what you say, but the problem with this town, and I've lived here as long as Sally has, there was always a lot of distrust in this town. Years ago, we put that same system that they got up to, for fuel over in Portsmouth, and I brought it up. Won't work in this town. I can go back to, and the tax base in this town, it's never changed. We've never brought any industry. Anything that tried to come into Tiverton, we threw out. I can remember when they wanted to build a dog track in North Tiverton, way before these guys were born. And the only thing that you heard on the streets in North Tiverton, even down Stone Bridge, the mafia would be riding around in those Buicks with Tommy guns. They loaded that up. Everything.
I follow you up to the Tommy gun part.
Everything that wanted to come into this town.
Maybe the
I'm glad
Buicks
there's
would.
not a dog park.
Everything that wanted to come into town, we threw out.
Yeah,
And you gotta remember, from Stone Bridge, or from Nanaquacket Road down, was all farms. The biggest thing in town was P.D. Humphrey lumber on Riverside Drive. That was it. And plus the Air Force with the oil tanks in Texaco. And that was another one that was almost thrown out, the Texaco, when they tried to come in here. There was a whole story behind that, but this town never wanted to grow, and they didn't want nothing in here to offset the taxes. And that's the mess we're in today.
I think you've hit on some very important points, that they make it too hard for businesses to come into town. The other part that you said about not wanting to become like a Newport or Portsmouth or Bristol, they're all built up and crowded, is something that's good, I think. And my last point, and I won't talk anymore, is that I know that Massachusetts did Prop 2.5, which you all know what that is, 1980, and it went into effect in 1982. And we're still 4%, 4.5%. And why did a successful state do that?
I'm going to tell you what they do. I'll tell you a lot about the Commonwealth because I've become a very astute student of how they do municipal government in
You have a lot of time to
Massachusetts.
study.
Well, no, it's become very important to me to know the difference. They don't have binding interest arbitration. They don't collectively bargain health care. Most municipalities in Massachusetts do not pay into Social Security. They offer their employees a 401k with a very big match, but they don't pay into a pension plan, and they don't pay into Social Security.
Is that difference between Mass and Rhode Island, and what about the rest of the country? Is it
Well,
very,
was just talking, I'm not done with my list. They
Okay.
have a Chapter 60 road, is it 60 or 70? There's a local assistance program for revenue sharing for road construction and road maintenance. And they actually let the towns govern themselves. So they have conservation commissions and boards of health that do a lot of the things that Rydom is supposed to do and doesn't really do. So you actually have control of municipal government in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. You'll never get it. Because if you think about all the things I just ticked off, how many of those things are going to change in this state? You take a radical change in the way we govern ourselves.
That's actually a good tie into what my final point would be, is I think I would go a step back. I mean, the money savings things you're doing with energy, and that's great, and it needs to be done. But if you take a step back, it's happening, I think, because there's pressure from people to stop this line from going up. If you look at where it stops, I did this for my professional website. Somewhere around here, right before it kicks up, is when the state implemented their tax cap. So in Tiverton, it was completely ineffective. Where this stops, finally, after 25 years, is where we started with the financial town referendum and petitioner budgets. And that's the pressure. That has to happen, and it has to happen throughout the state to go up to the state house. Because otherwise, you're literally hurting families. There's no other way to put it.
But are we going to see, because we've reduced things so in such a large way, we're so behind in keeping up with our buildings and our vehicles. In a year or two, are we going to be hit really hard and have to replace everything and be right back, because we didn't do 2.5%, 3% occasionally? Are we going to be right back where we were a few years ago, where we have to go to the 4%?
It depends what you spend it on.
Because we haven't kept up.
You're going to have to start making tough choices and priorities, and it's not fun. You have to do it in your own home, and when you build something, you have to make sure you can afford it. I'll tell you something. I went to some of those meetings for the library, and it was all about dreaming. Not once did they talk about expense. Not once. When you build a home, you may want that chimney or this special ornated thing or that extra room, and then you go, wow, okay, let's rethink this. You know, we can't afford it. And never. They went with these ideas, and they came back with a building. And then it was too expensive, but then when you wanted to know what it was going to cost, well, we can't really tell you because we don't know what we're going to get from OLIS, because until you approve the bond, then we'll know what we'll get from OLIS. So it kind of was up in the air. And who does that? Who builds things and doesn't know what it's really going to cost, or if you can afford to even run it? That's the problem. It's not that I don't agree that we needed a library, but it's just like you might need a new home, but can you afford a mansion? Well, no, you're going to afford something you can afford.
Question is
I
whether
mean, that's
people
all
can
I'm saying.
afford their
And then
mansion.
how do you go forward? Now it's like a vacuum. It's sucking the air out of the room in this town. It's just sucking it. 35% a year? I mean, who can afford that? And the thing that's different about a town to a family.
Wait. What is 35% a year?
It's went up 30, the budget went up 35%, yeah.
That one line item.
Yeah.
The library budget?
The library budget. The difference
From
between,
Essex to the new
the
library.
difference between your home and the town is that you can't buy a car or something that you can't afford,
Well-
and then go to your, and then go to your boss and go, hey, I bought a car I can't afford, so you need to give me a 10% raise. What's going on here is we're signing contracts we can't afford. We're building buildings we can't afford. We built 3 schools instead of 1, which would have saved money. Yes, we needed schools, but did we need 3? No. Now you get 3 to take care of. So what happens is then you are forced to out of your budget, and maybe you could make it on one pay. Now you're working with 2 and 3 jobs, and you're telling your kids, no, you can't afford anything because you're being forced. That's the difference. You're forced. No one's making decisions, and you want everything. You can't have everything. You can't. And then people have temper tantrums because they want it. They just want it. They don't care how they get it. Well, my kids used to do that. They'd want something. I said, I don't have any money. And then, no, I'm sorry, you can't have it. Well, people don't want to hear the word no. I don't either. I don't like no, but we're at a point where we can't afford anything.
And that's part of this, that's part of what this process is about. And we'll be coming up with budgets that we'll all vote.
And we all need to talk to each other about it.
And that's what we're doing.
To the point of the library, you make, it is, like, it's such a surprise that it costs so much. But I do know that the library, over a period of 20 years, was looking to rebuild and was out of compliance for many, many, many years. And they had to get a waiver to stay open, and they had a plan showing that they intended to build. They built a library square footage based on what was required by the state.
And I do understand that, but
and the same thing with the schools. The elementary schools, when my son went to Fort Barton, the bathrooms were third world. None of the schools passed the whole fire issue.
but they wanted to build one
They were in
very
huge
big building and not
disrepair.
have the
That-
three.
that's a-
It
that's
costs
a-
more. And you
Um,
have to think about that. It costs way more than we needed to pay.
Well,
And it was been
the
a
bottom
recession.
line is that
We've got it
both of
now.
those institutions, we didn't keep up with. And so we are all levied now, our generation, we're levied because it wasn't incrementally taken care of. And if there was a little more paid earlier, this wouldn't be so severe.
So I'd like to, Justin, we're on item number 4 on the agenda. We melded into that, so,
No, I want a full half hour to discuss mine.
yeah. All in favor? Yeah. Are there other items in terms of walking through this? And I appreciate Matt doesn't have to defend decisions that were made prior to even being here and all, and I really appreciate your insights and
Yeah,
doing this
thank
and
you.
Appreciate your insights, Matt.
It's really
and helping
helpful.
explain a number of these things. And frankly, I'm sure a number of people on the current town council didn't make these decisions either. And with the current budget, as I see it right now, we don't have issues around, we're not in negotiation with the contract, with the budget that we're looking at for any one of the different units. But it's certainly something that the sentiments that come out of this group is to say, there's not much to give anymore. And that will be the town council having to go into instructions with council and department heads to cut the best deal that they can. So are there other items that in this discussion that we didn't hit?
No, there are fine points, but I'm happy to just any questions by email or whatever.
Okay, great. So what I'd like to do, we're almost at 10:30, and Donna, it's her anniversary tonight, so I don't know. Nancy, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Whether we need.
I'm celebrating it tomorrow.
She's having.
We're celebrating tomorrow.
All right, okay. Good on that, and I apologize for missing that. Any other remaining items or issues that?
Just
recurring
one.
From prior meetings?
I assume that, yeah, I think this is something to discuss briefly. I assume that before I arrived, the minutes got pushed to the end?
Correct.
Yes, we
Okay,
did.
great.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I actually was hoping that would happen. Do we need a motion then to bow wave them for another week, or do we need a motion for that or not?
I'd like to do that primarily because both Deb and.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to bow wave the minutes approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed?
Okay.
Unanimous again.
I do want to discuss one thing under 4, which I wasn't here at the beginning of this meeting. Did anybody speak in the public forum at the beginning?
They did not.
Okay, so I think starting next week, I mean, we've had this item, and I was an advocate for this item. I don't know if I was happy I did, but I was an advocate for it. We've had it on there for week after week, and I would just like, I think starting next week, we're going to start our voting, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure, but I think the agenda is going to have some voting stuff because we're going to have our final budgets and whatnot. So I think that we've certainly done our yeoman's job with the open public forum at the beginning. So I think I would like to see it not be on the agenda, you know, for the next handful of meetings while we're doing the voting and trying to get all that stuff done. So I don't know if anybody else feels the same way. I don't know if it needs a motion or just a consensus, and maybe someone can just let Cecil know we spoke about it, or, yeah.
I disagree. It's the most imperative time to hear from your public, and
No.
we'll finally have all the budgets in, and to exclude the public from being able to make a statement.
We're gonna be
They
fine.
only have 3 minutes. It hasn't taken very long. It's important to hear the people that we represent.
I don't agree. Cecil, when he started this, we've never had them ever, okay? We haven't. So we decided to kind of do it as a trial. And he said, when we stop voting, we don't need any public input. We've already had it all. We've had our interviews, we've had our public forum. Personally, I can only speak for myself. I haven't found it constructive. I mean, I've been personally attacked. That hasn't had anything to do with the budget. And I can take it, but I don't think it was constructive. It didn't help anything. It didn't bring anything to the table. Anyone that we needed to ask were the department heads or someone in charge of a committee. That to me was enough. And I would make a motion to discontinue the public forum during the voting time.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I think we need to wait until we're a full board with both Cecil and Deb here, so that we can
We have a quorum and it's
vote
been seconded.
on
It's been
that point
seconded.
fairly.
Any other discussion? Okay, so the motion before would be is moving forward that we won't have open public forum or comments from the public
At the beginning of the meeting,
at the beginning.
on the agenda.
In favor? Opposed?
So let it be known that Tiverton Budget Committee doesn't want to hear from its town and its
Well,
citizens.
I
Right
think
here.
that's really rude, Jennifer. I
no,
gave you the
that-
reason why.
I
We've
heard-
already heard from everybody.
You had your-
There's nothing to bring to the table at this point.
Yeah, Jennifer, I appreciate what you're saying about having people speak. I like that. But they've had many weeks now to do it, and we need to get some of the work done, you know. And I frankly was very upset
still
by
get
one of the people.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Had a vote? Okay. Time,
Motion to adjourn.
have a motion on the table?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Didn't even